Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final Wednesday afternoon Doctoral Academy for 2022. And today we're going to be looking at the final effort in the journey towards doctorateness, and that is the examination. And we have our academic leader for research, Dr. Veena Singaram, who's going to be talking us through the whole process of the examination. So without wasting any of your minutes, Veena, I'm going to hand over directly to you. Thank you again for taking the time to do this presentation.
Thanks, Colleen. Good afternoon, colleagues. I was just joking with Colleen. She sent me a message to say, are you ready to do this? And I'm like, actually dawned on me, she can do this talk. So please, Colleen, add where you want to add in and come in wherever as I go through this presentation. And I hope that today's presentation will help to allay some of your concerns regarding the examination process. So Pamzila, can I share my screen? Can you, if you can stop sharing yours? Thank you. Hi, Pamzila, can you stop sharing your screen? So there we go. Thank you. Nope, not yet.
Okay, we can see clearly. Thanks, Veena.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so today's our final session. I'm hoping that actually what we will do is, in addition to the examination process, we will allay some of your concerns that we have. So I will actually just go through some of the more like the administrative processes that you need to be aware of as you prepare your mindset for this final leg of the journey of your doctoralness. And as Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. And there's a really amazing feeling on the day that you submit your thesis is a great sense of relief. And of course, when you rejoice at grad when you get your letter of examination. So I'm hoping that today we will be able to uncover or untangle some of the concerns and worries that you may have about the examination process. But I'll start with sort of giving you an idea of the pre-examination process. So naturally, you are preparing your thesis for examination. In a session prior to this, we spoke about how you need to actually have the end in mind. In other words, where are you heading with your thesis? What kind of structure do you want to submit it in, whether it's a monograph or whether it's going to be a thesis by publication. And so that is already something you would have decided on, which also then, in a way is going to inform your examination process. And then this is really important. You do not go and hand in your thesis at postgraduate when you are now ready to have it examined. That is a misnomer, and that is really sad. This is November. Many students are now expecting to graduate in the next graduation ceremony, which is in March. But unfortunately, I cannot accept their thesis because they have not submitted their intent to submit. And so without that intention to submit, we were not able to secure examiners. If we do not have examiners, we cannot take your thesis. So it's very important that at least 3 months prior to submission, you submit your thesis. Now, I also want to share with you, it is okay if you submit this form and you are not ready to submit. Just drop an email to the postgrad office to say, I'm sorry, I'm not able to submit right now. We will then, and give us perhaps a suggested alternate date. Maybe you need a month more or so. We will then write to your examiners and say, sorry, we're not able to submit the thesis to you now, but we'll submit to you in a month's time. And if by some chance that examiner is not available, it's also then our opportunity to say, okay, we actually need to secure another examiner when you submit in a month's time. So this is all not to make your life difficult, but can you see it's to facilitate when you submit your thesis, it goes for examination. And remember that we've changed the rules. You do not have to print your thesis, right? We're going green in the postgrad office as well. So in other words, you merely have to email your thesis, and there are some other forms as well, which I will share with you. There's a nomination of examiners that happens. I'll speak a little bit more about it just now. And just to also cover with you that we will have you have an examination process, but there's also a post-examination process, which is also important, where you prepare and submit a corrections or a rebuttal letter based on what the examiner reports were, and then you'll submit a corrected thesis, both with track changes or highlights and a clean copy. And then I'll also share with you some the instructions that are also sent to examiners. So you have an idea of what is it the examiners are looking for based on the instructions given to them to mark your thesis. So this is the form that you will submit when you want to, the intention to submit form. And basically what's important at this point, though, is the abstract. So in addition to the fact that if your details and supervisor's details, etc., you must provide an abstract, which you must get your supervisor to approve this abstract. So it can be between 300 and 350 words. I know we've said not more than 300 here, but we've actually given it a bit of leeway to 350. And highlight what your study is about, so that this is actually used to attract the right examiners who are familiar with your field to mark your work. Your supervisor, it is very important that your supervisor actually, after you submit a nomination form, then we will contact your supervisor and say, okay, student X has submitted a form, please send you nominate examiners. Now, just to share with you what's expected of your supervisor. They're expected to nominate at least 6 potential examiners. And the reason for 6 is because obviously first it's important for the supervisor and the student not to know who the examiners are. So it's part of the process of then, submitting more names. And obviously there's supervisors, when I present this to supervisors, I have a lot of problems because I understand it's difficult to find examiners in certain fields. But this is currently the college requirements. In addition to that, you need to at least 3 should be international and 3 national examiners. And then from there, we decide on 3 examiners that your thesis gets sent to. You are allowed to actually inform the postgraduate office if there is somebody who you do not want must examine your thesis, because you may be concerned, there might have been some issues along the way, etc. So you are welcome at that stage to also inform us about examiners you do not want, but you do not have the choice to tell us about who should examine your thesis. So this is actually quite a tedious process in the postgraduate office in terms of finding examiners, trying to secure them. And let me tell you, at this very moment, I mean, I'm sitting with almost like 15 nominations, of which 90% of the examiners have refused. So you can imagine the dilemma that we're in. So do not take this process lightly. It is important for you to remember to send in your form before you submit your thesis, at least 3 months before. So together with this, so the first thing that we also send with your examination thesis is the supervisor report, which comes from your supervisor. And why is this the case? This is to inform the examiner regarding the conditions under which the work of the thesis was carried out by the candidate, the extent to which the collection of data, solution of problems, deductions, etc., was your own efforts or discussion from the candidate and the supervisor. And by the way, this is not a confidential report. So the supervisor's report is also shared with the student. So when your supervisor is submitting their report, they can share it with you. And you can also co-sign the report before the supervisor submits it. So there's no confidentiality issues here, unless, of course, there is some issues and problems that the supervisor wants to bring to our attention, and when there's a break of communication between student and supervisor, and these are hopefully not going to be a situation where you are going to find yourselves in. So each examiner is required to assign a summative assessment based on 4 categories. So they will receive your thesis and they must make a decision, and they must then let us know whether or not number 1, your thesis should be accepted as is. And I really wish all of you get this. I'm sure we're all hoping for that. Or rather, the next alternative is that the dissertation can be accepted, provided there are certain corrections and revisions. That is actually then for the approval of the supervisor, myself, and the dean, and the college dean of research. Sorry, not the dean, the college dean of research. And then the third one is actually where a re-examination is required. So the examiner feels really strongly about certain issues in the thesis and will make lots of suggestions about the changes they want, but they are not happy to have it being approved at the university level. They want to see it again, so they'll ask for a re-examination. Please note, even if there is one examiner that asks for a re-examination, it has to be sent for a re-examination, irrespective if the other two examiners have said this is a brilliant thesis, except as is. So please be aware of that, that these are part of the examination regulation in the university. Unfortunately, there's also a category where the examiner can actually reject a thesis, and that can happen at doctoral level. And this is a very serious thing, because when a doctoral thesis is rejected outright, there is no appeal process. The student has to restart a new PhD. So it's obviously not something that we'd want. So I would caution you here. Obviously, all of us think that we're not in the situation. And it's sadly, I have to report that we've had such a situation. And very often when we unpack what has happened in the doctoral journey and why is this the case, it is unfortunate that in both of these instances at the moment, we've had a situation where the student did not take the advice of the supervisor. And that is really unfortunate. There are, I must share with you, instances where the supervisor did not provide adequate supervision, and hence the student beavered along with their work and was not aware of perhaps of a really incorrect methodology that becomes the premise for a study, and findings only to find that it was inappropriate or something to that effect. But just to be aware of that we do not want such a situation. Okay, in terms of the re-examination, I've just shared that with you, but I just want to remind you about this. So what happens is that generally a doctoral student will will register until, like, for example, this semester, if they submitted in 2022, and while the examination is while the thesis is in the examination process, we don't encourage this. It's not compulsory for the student to register, because we understand that it's an examination process, and then basically we're finalizing the examination, etc. But if you get a re-examination, you must register, because if you do not register, we're not able to submit that thesis, the corrected thesis that is, for examination. And unfortunately, we've had the situation where I've had a student who was asked for a re-examination but did not register and spent like 3 months working on the corrections, etc. And when they submitted it for re-examination, we couldn't, because the student was not in the system, and we are not allowed to submit them for the examination process. And so the student had to actually wait until the following semester, register, and then submit their thesis. So these are little things that can really mess with your timelines, and it is important for you to be aware of that. It is important in the re-examination process, and also when you're doing your corrections, for your supervisor to submit a report. So the supervision process continues all the way through. So you're not alone in this process. And I just want to also share with you that if you submit a thesis for a re-examination, and then the examiner comes back and says, okay, the student has made some changes, etc. I'm happy with these corrections, but I'm very unhappy with the following, and I therefore want you to be re-examined. There is no re-examination. A re-examination on a re-examination is considered a fail. So I'm sorry that I'm sharing with you, this end point of which may seem very depressing, but I think it's great if you have this knowledge and be aware of the various decisions that can impact, on a very long journey that you're embarking on.
I can just interrupt you here before everybody has a panic attack. It's very rarely that has happened.
Yes, I was just going to say that is hardly the case. I'm so sorry and the reason I was just sharing that is because, again, you need you just need one person to go through that, and then you think, oh God, I need to tell students about this so that they can really put an effort into it. And when they are doing the corrections, etc., they don't think, okay, let me just do a half-hearted job about it. But yes, of course, it's very rare. So keep the spirits up. All right. So let me share with you what instructions are given to the examiner so that you're aware of what they're looking at when they're marking your thesis. So the examiner is asked that, to ensure that the dissertations must show the following about the candidates: that they are acquainted with the methods of research and their application, that they understand the nature and the purpose of their investigations, and that they are sufficiently acquainted with the relevant literature. Now, with each of these points, we can go into a massive discussion about how important this is. But I'm aware that during the whole year, this is exactly all the various aspects of research that you have been covering. But if there's any questions, we can go through that. But the examiner writes a report showing how they think the student has actually achieved all of this. The other thing is that they also write about the techniques that you've used. Were you able to assess the significance of your findings? Is there evidence of critical thought? Is there evidence of a logical structure? And is there strength in your conclusion? Or are you just drawing on fairy conclusions that actually are not linked to your results, etc.? And obviously, it must be of a high, the presentation must be appropriate, your literary style must be appropriate. And let me share with you, if an examiner finds that there's lots of grammatical errors, spelling errors, etc., those are the reports that are the worst, because examiners get highly annoyed if a student and a supervisor does not take the time to ensure that the thesis is of the highest quality before submission. So they almost think like, as though if that's the case, I might as well just mark the student down. So be aware that you may have high quality work, but you may neglect on spelling and grammatical errors that could just annoy your examiner. So this is also an important thing that the examiners have been asked to look for. Does the doctoral thesis make a new contribution to knowledge or theory in the field? Is there novelty in their findings? So again, this is something which has been discussed with you. So these are the points that the examiners are looking for. I'm going to also, so the next thing is that when you are submitting your thesis for examination, there is a declaration form that you sign. And I wanted to actually, very often students just like sign this and submit it. But I think it's important for you to be aware of now, as you're preparing your thesis, what this declaration form is. It's actually declaring about plagiarism. This is a serious offense. If a student is found to have plagiarized work, that is almost a failure in a PhD. If the examiner feels that, this is really something you deliberately did. So be aware of this at the outset, right? And this form is signed by you to declare that your work is of your original and that it's not been submitted elsewhere, etc. It does not contain other people's data or information without you actually quoting or informing or acknowledging the source. And this is important where in terms of especially since we're driving the thesis by the examination by where you prepare your thesis with either manuscripts or published papers. So it is important as well that you also are declaring that as an author, as a co-author, that you've indicated in detail which part of the publication was actually written by yourself. And this is actually something you would have declared in the manuscript itself, prior to submitting it to a journal. Okay, so this is also something part of the declaration form. So all of this information, the examination processes are actually on the website of the university, on the research website, so you can all have a lot more details about this. But I'm going to actually stop here and ask you, do you have any questions or concerns that you have about the examination process that you would actually like to share now? And I think, Colleen, there might be more value in actually unpacking and having a discussion than actually presenting further, or unless there are aspects I left out.
No, I think we should open it up to discussion, because I think people do have their concerns. Have you got more to present, Veena, or is that the end of your presentation?
No, I think we can actually stop here. Yeah.
Okay. I'd just like to reiterate some of the points about the intent to submit. That intent to submit is very important because it's a battle to get examiners. I mean, I know I've done it for all these students to find people, first of all, who have a PhD, because all your examiners have to have the minimum of a PhD themselves. except in some circumstances, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's changed, Vina, in rare cases where there are hardly any PhDs across the globe in your particular area, and they'll take somebody based on their publications, but they won't take a novice. A novice examiner will not be tolerated. And I would never put a name forward with somebody who's just received a PhD. I've had an experience where a novice examiner, qualified, actually had a very silly outcome for a paper, and it had to go for a re-examination when they actually didn't understand the work at all. And that's very difficult to address because you've got all their comments that are completely out of context. So how do you tell the examiner that he doesn't know what he's doing? It's a great test in diplomacy.
Absolutely. But you're right. So they have to have a PhD, but if they don't have a PhD, yes, they must need to have a very, very strong CV, right? So a strong
Research
publications,
background.
etc., and all of that. And let me tell you, this is very important, right? So unfortunately, if somebody has published with you or your supervisor, they cannot be an examiner. And please note, I've just unfortunately had this horrible incident where the supervisor and the supervisor, yes, submitted somebody and they deleted from the CV all the joint things. And it goes up to the highest level and comes back really embarrassingly to say, have you done a Google Scholar search? Did you notice? And obviously this is a trust thing I have with our schools, right? So now we have to double check that. So if if your supervisor and you have done work with this person, etc., they cannot be nominated as an examiner. So be aware of that as well.
And just getting back to examiners you do and don't want, there is a rule that students are not allowed to know who the examiners are. And but I always ask the students, who out of all you've read would you like to have examine your thesis? And then I go and check those people out. And if I think that they are relevant, if they've got all the qualifications, I might put them forward as one of the 6. But where you will find out somebody that you don't want is specifically if you are doing your PhD by publication and you found that somewhere along the line in all your publications, you had one reviewer who just didn't seem on point, that didn't get what you were saying. You do not want us to use that person as an examiner. And I think you are perfectly within your rights to let us know that you had a tough time with that person, and then we clearly are not going to ask them. And if you want to comment further on that, Vina.
So yes, so one of them is that, and the other, it very well could be that sometimes you may have published at a conference and then, or published your work, and you actually find somebody has actually taken your work and suddenly decided to, in some way, just do some aspect of it, etc., and claim it to be theirs, right? So we've had those instances. That is not somebody you should examine your work, because what are they going to do? They literally are going to shred you, because, unfortunately, this does happen, because it's sometimes we take a long time before we publish our work. You do a conference presentation and you publish 2 or 3 years later. So that's also one of the things I've picked up as to who you should, you can probably be aware of, but you would know if somebody has done that to you. So yeah, those are some of the people.
Yeah, we assume integrity for everybody, and it comes as a shock every now and again when we realize not everybody has the same level of integrity that we would expect.
Yeah, so talking about integrity as well. So also, you are not alone in the examination process when you come back and you have an examiner who is really sort of like, unjustifiably decided to have lots of issues with your thesis, etc. That is why it's called a rebuttal letter. So you do not have to go and correct every single thing based on the examiner recommendation. You can rebut it about, thank you very much, but you have to be polite no matter what.
Diplomacy.
Diplomacy. You have to say thank you so much for your comment, and then you go with, however, we feel this and this is the reason, but do not give emotions, substantiated from a scientific perspective. So, and if you're having difficulties with that, we can help you out with that, because sometimes students write poor rebuttal letters, and that's where the difficulties start to occur.
I think another point I'd like to make that's beyond our control, and it angers me as a supervisor, is the length of time it takes for an examination response to come back. I've had 2 students who took a year, right back in the early, I think in 2012, 2013, it took a year for their examination to come back. And this year I had one that took 9 months for the examination to come back. That is not in the
colleagues,
control.
is it me or has Colleen frozen? Can you all hear me?
I'm okay. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me, or have I disappeared?
We can hear you, Prof.
Okay, so it seems to be Vina that's frozen. Vina, we'll just wait for you. Anyway, I'm talking now particularly about, I think Vina might have to go out and come back in again. But what happens is, from our school, everything goes up to college level, and it's the dean of the college dean of research that sends things out for examination. And at that point, me as a supervisor, I'm not allowed to ask anything. I'm not allowed to interfere. I'm not allowed to do anything. In fact, I got disciplined once because one of my students came back from the dean of research. Are you back now, Vina? I was just talking about a time when I got disciplined because one of my students had spoken to the dean of research and came back to me and said, oh, this particular examiner is hanging on to things. Won't you please chase it up? So I thought, well, the student's not supposed to know who the examiner was. And quite frankly, I'd forgotten because it's taken such a long time. And so I did follow up because I thought it was kind of coming from the office, and I got a letter of discipline because I apparently interfered. So the point I'm trying to make is, when this takes time, and I've often asked for some sort of process at college level, where if an examiner has not come back after 2 reminders, after going beyond their time, because I think they're given 6 weeks, aren't they, Vina?
Yeah, yes, they are.
Yeah, so they're given 6 weeks. And I really believe, and Vina, if you take it up, because it's falling on deaf ears if I say, after 2 reminders, so if you've gone a month after your 6 weeks, we've got to replace that examiner. I mean, this year we had people with all sorts of excuses. They had COVID and emotional problems and a million other problems. So my student missed the April graduation because of the waiting for an examiner to come back. So I'm hoping that things will be tightened up at that level. But what we need you to know is that is nothing we can do at school level, whether it's at Vina's level as academic leader or as me as a supervisor. Once it's out of my hands and out of Vina's hands, there's nothing we can do but wait.
However, I think it is important, though, you are within your right after a month, well, a month and a half to send an email to say, you know, hello, I just want to find out what's going on in my thesis. That's a good thing. And if you do that, it actually just, like, you know, I very often then we'll send that up to the college office, and we can follow up on that. So I just want to come back to where there's a delay. So I did take the situation up, and this is the problem. You know, unfortunately, it comes back down to integrity. You know, these examiners who are delayed, they don't give up. They do not, when we ask them, you know, please, can you retract as an examining secretary? They say, no, we will send it, and they do not send it. So the problem is that's where the difficulty is. Now you already have somebody in the examination process. So if we then approach another person, then we've got 4 reports that we have to process. So that has been the difficulty. So now we're trying to actually just try and see how we can force the retraction to say, okay, you know, if you're not able to do it, can you retract? So
maybe in the invitation, we say you're given 6 weeks, and if you're unable to come up with your response within 8 weeks, we will cancel the deal. And then we've got to think about our students. We've got to think about
that's true. But you know what a drama that's going to create, because everybody gets delayed, right? So we have to keep going back to finding examiners. But maybe we should check with the students.
In this particular case, had we replaced this examiner in March, the examination would have been through in time. Absolutely. But it waited and waited, and frankly, by the time they replaced this examiner, it took 2 weeks.
Yeah, crazy
So,
stuff.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very difficult situation. Okay,
Yeah,
I think we
so
should
I
open
just
up
wanted
the
to,
floor.
sorry,
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I just want to make a point, right? So the reason also why in the college we up and pushing the agenda of the thesis by publications is because you realize now how much more easy the examination process becomes. Because in effect, your examiner is just examining your chapter 1 and your first and last chapters. So, you know, your introduction chapter and your discussion chapter, if the rest of your chapters are all published papers. So, you know, your examination process becomes a breeze. So just sharing that with you. Yeah.
But to qualify that, if they're all straightforward, plain IMED type descriptive papers that don't make a thread, your examiner can still fail you.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to have shown doctorateness. So I mean, I've seen some theses with several papers, and I think to myself, if I was the examiner, I would say, they haven't really engaged with the literature. Lots of publications, but there is their doctorateness. So,
absolutely.
But I agree. The examiner finds it easier to go through papers than to read a long tome, because it just makes more sense. The research question is there, your methodology is there, your results are there, your discussion is there on each paper. And what's important then is your introduction chapter and your final chapter actually marries it all together. It creates the thread, and it then shows a larger doctoral attitude towards your work, a larger doctoral mindset.
Yeah.
Shall we open to discussion? Are there any questions from anybody? I don't want people to leave today feeling fear, because you know what? Lots of people have got PhDs. There are
Absolutely.
hundreds.
Absolutely.
There are several at every single graduation ceremony. Not as many as undergraduates, clearly, but you'll see there were lots. They all get through. And really, we have to tell you about the disasters, because those disasters have happened. But we do not want to make you think that those disasters are frequent.
Sorry, and I should add, yeah, you know, it's more like when you're doing a presentation, you want to like emphasize what you shouldn't do, but maybe I should emphasize that what you should do, you know, and we've had some amazing works in where it was literally 3 examiner reports, you know, except as is. And that was brilliant. I just had the delight of doing one coordinator's report where the examiner said, I'm sorry, but I cannot accept as is because he had one spelling error. And that's like, wow. I just think, you know, examiners have to earn their way kind of thing. I have to say something in a report. But yes, we have a lot of that.
I had one year where 2 of my students at the same graduation ceremony both had exactly the same. The one had 3 that said accept as is, and one had 2 accepted as is, and the one corrected. They said the little n should have been the large N, and actually we rebutted because they were wrong. So it does happen. But you've got to make sure that the quality of the work that you're going to send through is top notch. This is, you know, both Vina and I got our PhDs in Holland at different universities, but the system is different there. If your work is not perfect before your graduation, the ceremony where you have to give an oral and you go through an oral examination. Yeah.
Defense, that's a word.
The defense. So we did the oral defense. We created the thesis and we did an oral defense. So you guys are having it easy.
Absolutely.
Then if it's not perfect before you walk in there, they can actually fail you before you get to your defense.
Yeah. Absolutely. I remember as we're waiting for questions, one of the questions I got in my oral defense was the person, they just started off saying, I'm sorry, I have a huge problem with the theoretical framework. One of the theoretical frameworks is used for your thesis. And I think you should have used this and not this. And I don't agree with your findings. You know, first I thought, oh my God, there you go, failed this thesis now. So you have to, on the spot, you know, they're checking to see if you really understand why you've done what you've done.
Yeah.
And then I had to like literally say, that's a really good idea. That's a really brilliant theoretical framework. But, or however, this is why I've done this and this and this, etc. And then my supervisor afterwards said, do you know why she asked you that? that's her theoretical framework. She's really upset you didn't use hers. But they could fail you. Yes. So we
Yeah,
want
you
you
can
to choose.
fail on the
Yeah,
spot. Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah, so your supervisors bend over backwards in Holland to make sure everything is perfect.
Yeah.
And your thesis there, I don't know if yours was as well, Vina, it's produced as a book.
Yes.
With an ISBN number and everything. Yeah.
Yes. Actually had it lying around here.
There must be some questions about where you're heading with your examination process.
Or is anybody in there thinking about submitting next year or something like that? Or is everybody in their beginning stages?
A lot of my students watch the videos on this because they are in clinics at the moment. And I know I've got a couple that are handing in the next few months. So, well, if there are no questions about the examination process. And Twanano, were you going to ask a question? Yeah, I think that was an accidental click. While Vina is here, I would like to ask the people who are present. I know some people were present yesterday afternoon when we wrapped up the year for the support group, and where we asked everybody, what were your reflections on the year, the Doctoral Academy, particularly the Tuesday group? And what is it that any suggestions about going forward? So today is the last day of the Wednesday afternoon Doctoral Academy. And as you're aware, there are 2 different talks that we have every week. The Tuesday is more support. It's got to do with your well-being. And we cover things like imposter syndrome, accountability, those kind of soft skills is how we support the PhD candidate on a Tuesday afternoon. When it comes to the Wednesday, that's where we give tips and tricks and how-tos. It's practical advice. And what we noticed, and maybe you can answer this, is at the beginning of the year, we would have 80 to 100 people attending all of these. And it's whittled down to an average of 20. So I know that there's a lot of fatigue that happens, but is there something that you can tell us that we should improve on? If you could put in the chat, because we can actually download the chat. And as you put your views into the chat, we can also use those to take to the college, and we can use them as we develop the Doctoral Academy for next year. But as you go in there, you can unmute and just tell us, what has the Doctoral Academy meant for you through this year? And how can we improve? What did we miss out on? What did we produce that was useless to you? I mean, this year's curriculum was me sitting with a piece of paper at the end of last year deciding these are the topics we're going to cover, which is because it was under pressure and because it had emerged from something I'd been doing for the previous year or so. But now this Doctoral Academy belongs to the college, which means it belongs to you. So we need a much broader input into how we do things going forward. So I'm going to hand over to you, Vina, if you'd like to make a comment. And please, people, if you'd start putting in the chat any suggestions, any thoughts?
I think that, from the comments that we've gotten from students, I think it's really great the way it's structured at the moment in terms of the focus of the Tuesday, Wednesday, and people will go in and take what they need. And, in your doctoral journey, there are different points of where you are. Sometimes you're so swimming in stuff that you actually do not want to go and hear anything more. So, and like you said, these are all being recorded. So I think that's a good resource tool that we've got there, and that people can access. So I think that from that perspective, it's great. In terms of what other topics we can include, perhaps one of the things I think the online sessions are really great, but maybe we can plan in each semester, maybe 1 or 2 sort of like afternoon sessions, and maybe people just want to come grab a coffee and have coffee together or something like that, just to have a bit more of a bustling interaction, meet other other people create our own community of practice kind of thing as doctoral students is one of the things that I think perhaps we can think about as we're planning ourselves for next year. And then maybe, the other, you and I have discussed this, but we're also aware that we need to strengthen our supervision, our supervisors. And that's also a focus for you and I for next year, that we would do on both levels. So I think from that perspective of there.
So some people are aware that I have developed a collaboration with the Queensland University of Technology. And I'm going to go over for 2 weeks to see how they do their distance, because one of the successes of our doctoral academy is that people from Maritzburg, Durban, Stanger, anybody can come in here. And I was hoping a community of practice would form around this group. Having face-to-face coffee is great, but I don't even know if we have half our students in Durban, so it would feel like some people are advantaged. So I'm going to go and see how they actually handle their distance education, because they've got students from Fiji, from the Samoan Islands, right, remote Australian areas. So I'm going to go and have a look at their program and how they handle it. One of the things that I've always been adamant about is that this must be voluntary. I don't want a register to be kept that could be used against a student if they haven't been able to come, because how do we monitor how often they can watch the YouTube channel?
True.
And if you have a look, the YouTube's channel there, some of these things get watched quite often, not all of them, but some of them, and that gives me an indication of where we must focus going forward. But Queensland University of Technology has made a great success, and they've also got a supervision program going, and I'm going to be going to look at that, because they also acknowledge that their supervisors have received no training. And the problem with supervision across all academia, it's not only in medicine, is everybody thinks that because they were supervised at master's and PhD level, that they are qualified to supervise. But that was a traditional mentor-menteeship when you were gaining different specific skills, whereas now there's a whole andragogy behind it. There's a whole theory about how to deal with adults. This is adult education. We can't.
Yes.
And there's no way I could do the mentor-mentee to a surgeon. I pass out at the sight of blood still. I mean, I am there to help with the academics. I'm there to help get a research question. I can help you with your research, but don't expect me to stand next to you and tell you how to do an appendectomy. That's not gonna happen. That's not my expertise at all. So I'm going to try and bring some skills from Australia, but it's also nice to know from people here. It's one thing bringing from another university to here, but it's another thing knowing what the real needs are amongst our own students so that we can satisfy those. I don't want to copycat anything. If I find something that's going to be great that we can apply here, great, but I'm not going to just superimpose something on our students.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. That's awesome. So looking forward to hearing some fresh ideas.
Yeah. I think I'm going to pick on a couple of people to tell us what they've got out of the program this year. Tam, can you unmute? I think you might have known I was going to pick on you.
Yeah, I did. Hi. Yeah, it's so difficult to put it in just a few paragraphs, a few sentences, but I think there's one aspect of the academics and the technical part of being doing a doctorate, and then there's the other of really like self-development and growing in becoming this doctor, this person that owns this title, earns this title. And I think it's helped me manage who I am in the space that I'm in right now. And then just a background that's coming from, doing research and being a researcher for quite some time. And so there's a lot of, the hard stuff that you get, but the soft factors are really important for me. because that makes the difference in terms of how I go back to organizations, how I present my work, how I speak about my work, and how I write about my work. And that's really important. I think it helps you feel confident in knowing your research and knowing what your research is about and how it fits in within the scope of research that you're going to be working in. And it gives you those tools to be able to do what you need to do in a really short space of time with really sometimes unrealistic deadlines. And for me, that's why I keep coming back every Tuesday and every Wednesday. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tamlin. And just to let everybody know, Tamlin was an undergraduate student when I was still a lecturer in Maritzburg in the early noughties. So she's not a youngster like us. She's got old with me.
Yeah, definitely not a youngster.
Raziki, can I ask you for your comment, please? Raziki, are you with us? I am aware that sometimes people can't unmute. Okay, Raziki, I'm going to watch. If you can unmute, just let me know. But can I ask you, Mitchell? I know that you are a more advanced academic. Can you let us know what this session has meant to you? And have you been following just mainly the Wednesdays and not the Tuesdays, or both?
Yes, Prof. I found the sessions very useful. I haven't been able to attend the Tuesday ones because I'm in private practice, although I would like to have attended it, and I've missed some of the Wednesday ones, so I'm very grateful for the recordings. Some of the content was not relative to my PhD, but it was really good to have that knowledge base available to me going forward, because I never know when I'm going to be able to supervise something myself. And I found everything very helpful. I don't have any criticism, so I don't really, that's not really handy for you to build on. But I'm grateful for the recordings that are there as well, so that I can go through that. But I really want to say thank you very, very much to everybody involved. It was really a good learning curve for me, and great presentations. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you, Mitchell. I think what you have done is reinforced how important the videos are. Vina, would you like to make a comment on that?
No, I think I was going to say, I think that was a great idea about the recordings. It's very comforting when you're a doctoral student and you cannot get to everything, to know things are being recorded and I can get to it later. It's just really, even from a mental perspective, to know, all right, it's there. I'll be able to get to it. So I'm glad that we've, that we have all of that.
And sorry to interrupt. I think the drop-off may well be relative to the stages that one is in the journey to the PhD, as Vina did intimate earlier on.
Yeah, we have a lot of beginner stuff in the beginning of the year, and there are a lot more beginners than there are finishers. So that might have an impact. I'm going to ask Phumzile, who is on the screen as CHSPR-CHS, to let us see you, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Phumzile, are you at your desk or you're just running around? Phumzile, are you there? Okay, I'm going to come back to Phumzile because I know she has to end the session. So I'm going to take some other talk for 5 minutes. Abida Khan, can I ask you to let us know what the Doctoral Academy has meant for you this year? And if you can think of anything, how we can improve going forward. Okay, Abida doesn't seem to be coming through. Fizewe, can you hear me?
Hi, Prof.
Hi,
Putting me
Fizewe.
on the spot there. I'm not a very big speaker. I actually, gather thoughts before I speak. So, but like I said yesterday, for me, these sessions really felt like a safe haven. They felt like home, where you can just, if you want to share something, you share without fear of being judged. So like I said again, I work for an institution and I haven't received such support so for me, this has been a great haven, and I'm looking forward to next year. Thank you, Prof.
Oh, thank you for that, Ziwe. Bina, I don't know if you've got Phumzile's phone number, if you can give her a buzz and tell her to get on screen for us, because I think everybody would love to see her. They get these emails that they respond to her and they answer her questions. Ah, there she is.
She just knows. She knows I was going to call her and say, Phumzile, we know you're hiding.
Okay, so
I'm
here is
here, Prof.
oh, that's good. Everybody, this is Phumzile, the lady in the background who handles everything, who takes our adverts from Lanine and me and anybody else, and she liaises with all of you all the time. So at the end of this year, Phumzile, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you. I am so grateful for the kindness you put into this project, for the passion you show, and that you're there for us all the time. And if I can ask the rest of the people online to all use your icons or the reactions, and please give Phumzile a rounding and sounding applause. There we go. Jamila's got it. Abina's got it. Biziwa. Bonado sends you love. And let me get my reaction going as well. There we go. Potty time. Shamila sending love. So thank you very much, Phumzile, for all the hard work. And it's going to start up again in March next year. We might start on the 1st of March. It will be the first Wednesday after all the registrations. So we're going to take a 3-month break because this time of the year is crazy. Everybody's tired. We're trying to wrap things up. January, everybody is flat. You're trying to get through the alcohol poisoning from Christmas. And February, we've got registrations and we need the new people to get up to speed, and everything will start off fresh. We'll have a new curriculum. A lot of talks will be repeated clearly because we're going to have new people. But please, everybody, feel free to send Phumzile or me or Lanine an email with any positive suggestions, how you would like to see things, because the Doctoral Academy no longer belongs to me. It belongs to all of you. So I'm going to leave it to say thank you, Vina, for your presentation. I think things are very clear for the student. Again, thank you to all the students who've been faithful throughout the year, listening in on us, contributing. And to Phumzile, once again, thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. Take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and I look forward to being energized in the new year. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Colleen.
Bye.
Thank you, Prof. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Prof.